Now, the interview with O.P. Wright was something else. I brought along bullet photos to show him because he could be expected to have an educated eye for bullets. I knew at that time that before becoming Parkland's security director, he'd been a Dallas police detective. That's all I knew, that he'd been a Dallas cop. What I didn't know at the time, but have learned since, was that Wright had been not just another Dallas cop. In fact, Wright had been deputy chief of police in charge of the patrol division in the mid-1950s. I remember Wright as a big man in a white shirt and a necktie, sitting at his desk in a small basement office. The room was small, and I remember sitting not across from him, but by his desk. And after a few inconsequential questions that I can't recall, I started working in the direction that I wanted to go. You know that bullet that you got from Tomlinson, I asked? The one you passed on to the Secret Service? What did it look like? Well, it was pointed, said Wright. And it wasn't messed up that bad. It was, like that bullet that I gave you for the gurney. So I pulled out a yellow legal pad, put it on the desk, and drew 3 different kinds of bullet shapes. One was sort of pointed, like the .30 caliber unfired round that we'd used with the gurney. And the second, had a rounded tip, like .399. And the third was kind of squat, like a .38. Wright pointed to the one with the pointed tip. I got a couple of photos here I'd like to show you, I hazarded, pulling the manila folder out of my case. Wright didn't say anything. I placed on his desk a black and white 8x10 of Commission Exhibit 606, .38 caliber projectiles. Next slide, please. And there they are, believe it or not, 606. Okay. No, not like those, Wright said. They're .38s. I put out an 8x10 photo of Commission Exhibit 572. Next slide, please. This is the firearms ID rounds. No, Wright said, now becoming a bit impatient. I told you it was pointed, not like those. And then I showed him .399. Next slide, please. There it is. No, that's just like the others, Wright said. I told you it was pointed. He then reached into his desk and retrieved the projectile that we'd been using with Tomlinson earlier that day to simulate the finding of the bullet. He held it between his thumb and his forefinger, and he said, like this one, pointed, like this hunting round. I asked him if I could keep the bullet. He said, sure. And that night, back at the hotel, I photographed it with the Polaroid camera. Next slide. As you can see, I put a hotel key beside it. There's the round to give a sense of scale. So we left his office, and we rejoined the others. And a bit later, we were all standing around together, and Wright said, pointing to the photo of .399, allowed once again that it didn't resemble the bullet that he'd gotten from Tomlinson. And still later, while we were just getting ready to leave the hospital, Wright pulled me aside. Mr. Thompson, he asked, that last bullet photo you showed me, the one they say I had? I answered, yeah. Wright kept looking at me for a few seconds, but he didn't say anything. And a few minutes later, we left the hospital. I never saw Wright again.